Welcome back. Today we are going to talk about the Queen of Audio, Vesper 2. So I never had a chance to listen to Vesper 1, but today we are going to look at Vesper 2. And so quite nice looking shell. I love the blue swirl, resin shell. Quite nice. I mean, this is probably the build that you're expecting at $80 or $100. So yeah, I think they did really well on the color, the shell. Cable is actually quite nice. It's a little thicker or stiffer, than what you are thinking about. I think sometimes you get a silver braided cable like this one, and it's nice and soft and pliable. This one is just a little. Actually, you can see it right there. It's just a little stiff, a little stiffer than I was expecting. But other than that, actually a very nice cable. You do get a nice case as well, and you get two sets of tips. So they have one narrow bore, or not narrow, but narrow-ish, and that one's in the orange, so nice set of tips there. And the wider set, which is in blue, and I would go with the blue one. I think the wider actually works out a little better. So other thing to know about Vesper 2, it is one dynamic driver and one Knowles BA driver, so it is a 1+1. So let's kind of jump right into it. And I don't have a ton of things to say about this one, and mainly because of this. Who should buy it? It's really targeted towards treble and sibilant sensitive people. It's got a very low treble level, and it's pretty much targeting that market. And that market actually is not as small as you think it is. There's lots of people who look for this style set. And that should really be your primary preference here. I think if you're just looking for, or you don't know what you're looking for a general purpose set, this one is not quite that. This one is very much targeting people who like a lower level of treble, and we'll look at the graph a little bit later. But secondarily, I do think if you like a thicker mid, a thicker bass, lower, and a very neutral upper, this one kind of hits your target as well. But between those two things, between looking for a treble and sibilant sensitive set and kind of a thicker lower bass, neutral upper set, I can't reinforce enough that this one is very much targeting a very specific group who are treble sensitive, and that if that's not your primary preference, then I would probably look at other QoA sets or Canera sets, but this one has a very specific tuning to it and target that is not quite a general purpose one. It's very much leaning in that direction. So the pros of a set like this, it does have nice playback in this style. I think they did a pretty good job at accomplishing, it sounds quite reasonable on music as you're assuming it's going to sound. It sounds actually quite reasonable. It does have a thicker low end than you're expecting, even though the graph doesn't look all that big. Because the treble is brought down to such a low level, you hear all the bass, and it does have quite a bit of presence to it. And this one, and again, it shouldn't be too surprising. It needs quite a bit of volume to find the sweet spot, which is less obvious with this treble range. I think immediately when I started listening to it, I immediately started pushing the volume up button, because you're always expecting the mids and the treble to fall in place, and it just works out that way on so many different sets. And on this one, not quite. Again, it's very much for people who like a lower level of treble, and no matter how much volume you push in it, it's always going to sound a bit lower than what you're expecting it to sound like. So the cons of this style tuning is the hybrid theory, the theory that a one balanced armature plus one dynamic driver is going to be better than a one dynamic driver. It's a little questionable here, as it's intentionally overly safe, right? They brought down this treble level to a point where it sounds super safe, and where you're expecting to hear the balanced armature advantages is really hard to hear with a level like this. So, and on top of that, I think there are a couple missing parts here: clarity and dynamics. And again, it's this treble level doesn't convey a high level of clarity. Everything sounds a little bit veiled, and the dynamics kind of sound compressed or restricted. It really makes listening to female vocals like Taylor Swift challenging. It's okay. I don't think it's bad at all, but for $80, I think this is pretty much, again, you have to be buying the set for this specific reason, as opposed to I have a general pop music set that I just want to listen to my playlist. That's not exactly what this one is. You are choosing this style and treble level over pretty much all the other characteristics. And you'll immediately try to raise the volume, as I just said, to get the upper treble and the clarity to improve, but it's very elusive. It's very hard to find a sweet spot where this one sounds right because of the treble level. So the playback is pretty good, but the experience, what you actually get out of this set is pretty much this. It gives you a very safe treble. It's not a big engaging sound. It's pretty much a kind of a flat, very safe sound. And sound, I would just say it's really hard to pull off a thick mid bass bleeding into the mids type set without bumping 3 to 5, without putting some energy into the lower treble, because it has to ride on top of a thicker bass here, and it's just really hard to hear that BA contribution here. So let's take a quick look at the graph, and you can kind of see what is going on here. And again, as I said, so EPZ Q1, I had almost the same kind of thoughts about it. Has a nice bass shelf, which you can hear pretty good. They have a very safe pin and gain area. And then they kind of dipped out here and here. And I said it, it's a very unique sound. It's a sound that people look for because it has almost no energy where people get fatigued, and it doesn't have a whole lot of energy out here. But for regular music playing, and if you're just picking up a random set, it sounds a bit off because these levels are so low. So what Vesper 2 does in the red, so you get a little bit more mid bass, and like I said, the bottom end is actually quite thick because there's not a whole lot of treble here. So you hear a whole lot of this mid bass presence, and it's quite thick and very much there. And not much pin and gain. Like I said, Taylor Swift is going to be a little bit on the lower dynamic side because of that level. And they do give you a little energy at 3K, but then you dip out pretty hard again in this 4 to 5 range, and then you get to ignore the 8, and then the rest of it sort of arcs over, and there's not a whole lot of extension there in the upper treble at all. So yeah, from about here to here in that range where most tracks lie, again, as I said, it's pretty much pretty good playback because you have enough energy, and this is not fatiguing, and it's very smooth and warm, and I think that does pretty well. But if you're looking for a higher level of treble and treble presence, that's not what this set is. Like I said, it's very much for people who are sensitive to sibilance, which is kind of right over there, and maybe a fatigue point at 5 or 6, or upper treble fatigue points. It doesn't have any of those. It's just pretty much a smooth arc over, but cover enough of the treble to make it sound like good playback. But the rest of it is pretty much rolled off, as you can see. So there you go. If you're looking for your treble sensitive or anti-sibilant style set, I think Vesper 2 has you covered. So that's what I got on Vesper 2. Thank you again for tuning in, and I will see you next time.